art goals for this year. So I'm a perfectionist. It's almost like crippling perfectionism, which is why these are like my goals. But one of them is to be less afraid of experimenting and to make mistakes and also make ugly art. First of all, I feel like there's not really such thing as ugly art. I guess there is, because art is subjective, but also there like also can't be ugly art because art is subjective. Like someone could think it's ugly, someone could think it's amazing. I mean, there's famous artists whose work I really don't like, but they're famous, so that just goes to show that art is very subjective. But yeah, just basically to be less afraid of experimenting. My work, I think, sometimes can be very like rigid. I don't know if that is the word, wanting it to be perfect down to the tiniest detail. Yeah, I don't know, I'm just so scared to experiment, and then when I go to experiment it almost feels like I'm experimenting for the sake of it, or I'm kind of like experimenting but I'm still kind of doing it with my perfectionist mindset. So I'm like experimenting and wanting it to come out perfect, which is also kind of like my second goal, which is to be looser in the work I make. My sketchbook work, I feel as though looks very, very different to my final pieces, and sometimes I actually end up preferring my sketchbook work to my final pieces. So a lot of the time throughout uni as well, I would have an idea for painting, I'd do the thumbnails, and then I would do like a rough version where it would be like the final version, but I just do it rough so I know what I was doing, so I knew what the colours were like and essentially what the final piece would look like. And then I would do the final piece, and my rough sketchy tester version would actually, I think, look better than the finished piece, because my finished piece was very, even though I really like having exploring like bold lines in my work now and exploring a bit more like texture, it felt very controlled, and it kind of feels like, I don't know how to explain it, but I'm guessing if you are an artist or a creative person in any like aspect, it almost feels like pulling on a leash and someone's like holding me back. Like if I was on a leash and someone was like pulling me back and I'm like really trying to like pull forward, that is what it feels like whenever I go to create something, because it's like I really want to do it and like experiment and just like do the artwork and not worry about having a perfectionist, but then like my perfectionist like holding me back on a leash like really, really tight, and I'm always like like, does that make any sense? Because that's what it feels like when I sit down to create a painting. I'm like almost like, okay, let's just get into it, let's just relax, let's just keep it loose. And then there's like my perfectionism behind me holding me back like really tightly, so I'm having to do everything perfectly and everything controlled, and that's what it feels like. And I'm just trying to like get rid of that person pulling me back. There's a lot of work in my sketchbook that I love, and then I'm like, oh, let's turn it into a painting, and then I do the painting and it doesn't feel like loose and relaxed like it does in my sketchbook. It feels very like perfectionist and controlled, which is nothing wrong, but I think I just prefer my work when it feels like there's less pressure. And my last art related goal is to share my ideas. I don't mean necessarily with the internet, but I kind of mean with my sketchbook, with my friends, with other creative people, or like people that I'm doing projects for. There's a couple of projects I'm doing at the moment, or like jobs that I kind of have where there's like projects involved, and sometimes people will like ask me for ideas, and I just feel like all of mine are rubbish. Like even when we would have group crits at university, it would get to the stage where I would look at people's work and then the lecturer would be like, oh, okay, well, who's got ideas or whatever, and I'd just sit there and be like, your work's really great, but I don't have any ideas. But I think, again, like I always tell myself like, oh, I'm like a creative person, but I don't really have any creative ideas. I'm not very creative in my thinking, which I think, like when I really think about it, it's just rubbish. Like I think it's because for so long I've been like, oh, that idea's rubbish, that idea's not very good, don't share it, you're not very good at thinking of ideas, and now I just think like I'm not very good. But I think to get to a good idea you have to have rubbish ideas. And also, I don't even necessarily think they're rubbish ideas. I think there's just different ideas suited to different projects or different pieces of artwork. Certain ideas aren't going to work with certain art projects or certain projects that you're working on. Like, this is part of like sharing my ideas, but I think discussion is part of the idea generation process, because quite often, like at the minute, I'm helping out with a project and I'm thinking of ideas and I'm like, oh well, I just don't have any ideas, my ideas are rubbish and I can't think of anything. But I think also, especially in the early stages, I think discussion is like part of that process. I'm writing down ideas and then it gets to a point where I'm like, I'm stuck, I can't really think of anything new. But I think that is where discussion comes in, is that bouncing ideas off other people can help you think of new things and also help you figure out what ideas are like working and what ideas aren't working. Also, I think I just have major imposter syndrome. I just feel like I'm not a proper artist or not a proper illustrator, and that like when people ask me to create them a piece of artwork, or when people ask me for ideas, having experience in illustration and art and being at uni for 3 years, I always feel like I'm going to give them my ideas and they're going to be like, well, I could have thought of that myself, that's a rubbish idea. But people, I don't think actually think that. But sometimes I'm just so paranoid about what other people think and like my work not being good enough, and just again this whole perfectionist thing. So this year I just want to relax and put my ideas out there. If my ideas aren't great, it doesn't matter, because you just move on to the next idea. Again, I think it's just the whole thing of overthinking. Like, everyone's in their own world, no one's really assessing you that much. Like, I've never been in a group crit, or no one's ever given me one of their ideas and I've been like, that idea is really rubbish, or that idea is awful. Like, there might have been times when I thought, okay, that's a really cool idea, but like, I don't think it's going to work with what I'm doing, so let's discuss something else. But I've never sat there and thought, that idea is really, really bad, so like, why are people going to think that about me? Yeah, it doesn't really matter. Like, just share your ideas. If they're not great, it doesn't matter, you just discuss it and find a different one. So yeah, that's just what I'm kind of thinking about this year, is just getting rid of, or letting go of the perfectionist, and being loose with my work, experimenting more, and not being afraid to like share my ideas. Also, another one I just remembered, I guess it links to all of these, but like making ugly art, or just not being afraid to make art in front of people. Again, it's going back to this whole thing of like perfectionism and thinking people are going to think I'm like not a real artist or not a real illustrator, or my ideas aren't good enough, blah blah blah. I find it really hard to draw in front of other people. So like when I go to my placement and stuff, or when I'm at work and I might be doing a bit of drawing to pass some time, if there's people walk past my sketchbook, I have to kind of like hide it and like close it, or pretend to flip through the pages to do something else, because I'm so paranoid people are going to look at it and be like, that's awful, that's really, really bad. Especially when it's in the first stages, or you draw something and I don't know, you draw an animal or a person and like the proportions are wrong, one eye's like up here and the other's down here. I'm so paranoid people are going to look at that and be like, and she calls herself an artist or an illustrator. It's such an annoying feeling, and that is also something I just want to get past. Just like make ugly art. It doesn't have to be good. But again, art is subjective, so I guess anything could be good if you view it from the right perspective. Anyway, moving on to the next section. I'm so excited about this bit. I wanted to show you some of the work that I've created recently, because I feel like I have been creating, or I feel like I've created a lot of work since being back from uni, and especially now, like coming into January, I feel like I've got a lot of creative ideas that I'm just kind of trying to explore more of. So the other day, or like recently, we've been watching, I think it's Kingdoms on BBC iPlayer. It's narrated by David Attenborough, and it basically is like in Africa, the different species like hyenas, wild dogs, lions, and I think it's jaguars, exploring their lives, I guess. But I was really inspired to do some drawings from that. So I did this big lion drawing. Again, it's not the easiest to focus, but this one I did from a reference photo from Pinterest, because I'd never drawn a lion before, so I did that. I kind of like tried to squish them all in on one page and was just doing some like fun mark making. And then I kind of moved on. I tried to do a line from memory. Looking at this now, it's like really out of proportion, but considering I'd drawn a lion once, I think that was pretty good doing it from memory. But also we have cats and my sister's got a dog, so I think that is also helpful in terms of like being able, or like being already kind of familiar with like a feline kind of form. These ones were from photographs on Pinterest, but I was just trying to keep it like kind of loose, and just I guess trying to give them a bit of character as opposed to drawing them like completely realistic. And then onto a big painting that I did. I was going to colour this one in, and I'm still kind of like, shall I not? But now I've done that a couple of days ago, I think I'll just leave it as a painting. But I did this painting of a lion. Again, this was from a reference photo on Pinterest, because there's not an actual lion for me to draw from. But yeah, I was actually pretty proud of that. I did it in pencil and then I went over it in gouache. I was going to use watercolour, but gouache, I use like watercolour, but with gouache you can get more vibrant colours and they're not as transparent, which I I'm quite enjoying. And I also really liked doing this dark background, which then led me on to, because obviously I'd drawn a couple lines, I was kind of like familiar with what they looked like. I was able to draw one from memory. I know I keep saying from memory, but I'm so proud of myself. I drew a line without using a reference photo, and when I think about that, that's like kind of crazy. Like, I kind of like tried to imagine what position it would be in, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna draw it. His eyes are very out of proportion, but I don't really think that matters, because I think it gives him a bit of character. Again, it's going back to the kind of like keeping it loose. I don't want it to look perfect. I want her, I guess, the lioness, her, to have character and to be kind of unique. So this was really, really fun. Because the background was dark blue and I kind of wanted it to be a dusk sort of nighttime-ish scene, I was like, I need to paint over the lion in a pale wash of blue. And I was like, I'm gonna ruin it. I'm gonna ruin my painting by painting over it blue, like whatever, mess it up. And then I was like, I'll just leave it, I won't do it. And I was like, no, I was doing this piece to be experimental, and I was like, you're just gonna have to do it, because if it's an experiment then you have to do what you said you were gonna do. So I just painted over her with blue paint anyway. It was like a thin wash of blue just to darken it, make it look a bit more shadowy, and it actually went fine. Like, I think she looks pretty cool. So yeah, I'm pretty proud of that. I think maybe the blue could have been darker. I also wrote a little bit of text because I kind of wanted to have like a little bit of a story. So the text says, the sun sank below the horizon and the lioness observed us from the safety of the undergrowth, her eyes green and yellow like jewels shining against the darkness. I'm not a very good story writer, but I just wanted to give a bit of story to the painting. So yeah, I'm actually so proud of this one, and I maybe will turn it into an actual painting, but again, I want to keep it loose like it is in the sketch without worrying about it being perfect. So yeah, moving on. This is on the same day. Out just outside of my window there's like a bush, and these long-tailed tits come and land on it, and I was like, this would make such a cute little painting. So I did some sketches of the birds that I took from my video. Here's the sketches of the birds. And then again, I really loved the dark background I did in my lion painting, so I was like, I'm going to do a similar thing for this painting. This was my little experiment piece, and then I really wanted to make that into an actual painting. It's going to lose all its sketchiness, but I ended up turning it into an actual painting. I will show you that in a minute. But I think I managed to keep the kind of sketchiness and like the same way it kind of feels in this painting, so I will show you that in a minute. But again, I'm just doing my sketchbook at the moment. And then yesterday I did some more lion stuff. I did these faces. This one, forehead was tiny. This one was like, okay, I guess a little bit better. And then these are just like little form sketches that I did. This one was a copy from a book that I have. I'll show it to you. I forgot I had this book, so I've been using this yesterday. I got it from Vinted. I saw it on Pinterest like a couple of years ago, but it's basically just an artist's like sketches teaching you about the form of different animals basically. And I really like this book because it's also got the skeleton, like the bone structure of each of the animals, which is really, really helpful, because then I realised later on that there's also a big cat section with their bone structure and their kind of like muscle form, which was really helpful in trying to like figure out how they moved and what kind of positions they would be in. So that was really helpful. But yeah, there's some like kind of form sketches in here, like these sort of sketches, like really mapping out the shape of the body. So I did copy a couple of those just so I could get in the habit what they felt like. So that was one, that's the one that was here, the one that I copied from that book. And then I went on Pinterest, got up some lion pictures and tried to do my own versions of these little sketches. They're actually really hard to do, these sketches, so I think it's definitely something that needs practice, but I was just trying to like get down their form. I did some more here. These are my own ones from photographs of lions on Pinterest. This was actually my cat, he was asleep. I tried to like take some from that, but it's basically just like mapping out the face and the body and like the lines, the curving lines that are in the body and stuff, which I think is also really good because then you can exaggerate them and make your drawings feel more like characters and have more character. After kind of like doing the form a little bit, I did my own sort of sketch from my brain, like trying to put that form into its own pose. And then I did a sketch taking that. Again, it's not perfect, like I'm not sure about the top of the shoulder. He's supposed to be like walking and like looking down with his head lowered down. I essentially took that and turned that into my own painting, which I was also proud of, because again, that means I didn't have to use a reference picture. And again, proportions probably aren't right. I think could have been a bit bulkier. The legs also quite long coming back here, and like just feels very exaggerated. And I just feel like it needed to be bulkier because it's a lion, not a cat. Still kind of like proud of it, I guess. At the end of the day, it's practice, so I'm not really that much fussed. I'm going to show you some of the paintings that I've done recently, like proper paintings that aren't in my sketchbook. So this first one is the long-tailed tits painting that I did in my sketchbook, and then I turned it into a painting. So I tried to keep it quite loose, sketchy. I only added pencil over the birds and then left the rest as it was. Actually quite proud of this one. It looks so cute, and I think it would look really nice on card. But yeah, that is one of my paintings. This one was from a combination of my own photographs and sketches. So this was from a photograph that I took. The cows weren't actually there, it was just for landscape, and then I added the cows in separately. But this one was just kind of like a watercolour sketchy painting rather than a finished painting. But yeah, again, it was like a sketch. I turned that sketch into like a painting kind of sketch, and then yeah, like painted it, I guess. I've got the sketch before I painted it here. I scanned it in, so there's that. I really just love the cliffs where I live. I just think they're really nice, and I've never painted them before, so and sketched them, so that was quite nice to do. Next is like these little pieces. I don't really know how much I like these, but there's some like mushrooms and stuff in our garden, so I thought I'd just paint them and then like write what they are. Okay, there we go. So these are earth stars. They're like little puffballs. You like touch them and the spores will get released. But I did some like different mushroom paintings. So we've got earth stars, fly, agaric, and slimy beach caps. So I thought these made quite a nice set of paintings. I just thought they were quite sweet, like different kinds of mushrooms that you can get. My bigger paintings I've got in frames, just like chucked in cheap little frames just to like protect them. So it's kind of like slipped from the top of the frame. It has got a white border. This is another painting that I've done. I'm trying to hold it down so you can actually see it without it reflecting the light. It's very yellow. I did some yellow wash of ink on this painting, but it's my sister walking through one of the woods on the island. So this next painting I've done, I'm actually quite proud of. It's been an idea in the making for ages, but it's basically kind of like a little self-portrait. I always feel so big-headed when I've got myself in a painting, and there's the top, but it's kind of hard when you've only got yourself to use as a reference picture. This piece was an idea in my ideas notebook, I don't know, probably like 9 months ago. This is my little ideas notebook where I keep just like loads of ideas. This was the sketch months ago. It was kind of like a bird flying over some trees, and then the second one was like the same idea but with a person in it. So then that is where this idea came from. That's why I love my little ideas notebook, because then I can just come back to it when I'd like to do sort of a painting idea. But it was also kind of like inspired by another place on the island where you tend to get a lot of ravens, and whenever you walk down there you can always hear them, so that is also kind of like what this was inspired by. My work in my sketchbook, this feels very precise and like make sure you get it perfect. It has to all look good and like concise, and everything has to go in its like specific location. And then when I do my stuff in my sketchbook, it's a lot looser. I feel like I can relax a lot more. So yeah, I think I want to experiment doing some larger pieces, but with actual less stress from making it feel like it's perfect. So that's everything, I think, more or less, that I've created. There's a few other sketches and bits and pieces that I've done, but that's just the main bits that I wanted to show. Yeah, I hope that kind of inspired people to just create without the perfectionism. I think perfectionism though is something that comes with like a lot of creative people and a lot of artists. I think it's just something you've just got to kind of work past. I hope you liked some of those pieces, because there's some of them that I'm actually really proud of. But I need to get on with some work for the rest of today. I have some more paintings that I want to do for my exhibition, just a couple of ideas that I want to put into movement. Yeah, I'm just looking forward to having a creative day.